Style is not lusting after someone because they are cool. Style is loving yourself until everyone else does too. Now, of course, that's from Emancipation, and that's 4 years after the album that we were connecting all of the research to today, The Love Symbol. But if you were with us yesterday, Edgar did close out with his presentation with a reference to the connective line between the Love Symbol era through interactive and the gold experience and emancipation, which is very true. There are linear connections from before and after Prince's developing eras that led to this extremely creative and fruitful era. And considering this is the style and fashion panel, I felt that we should just shout out a little bit of those lyrics from Style off of Emancipation. So once again, this is the fashion and style panel for the Love Symbol. And we have today here Casci Ritchie, Karen Turman, and Robin Shumays, who you just witnessed amazing presentations from all of these women. Sorry, I keep saying amazing. It's like an episode of The Bachelor, but I just, it's what just jumps in my head because I did get to see all these presentations beforehand and my mind was blown with everything. I was just telling D'Angela and Arthur before that each presentation that comes up, I mean, it's just constant, bombs exploding in your head as you realize all of these connections. I do want everyone to put some Q&As into the Q&A box, but I want to also let everyone know that you can upvote other questions. So if we do end up getting a huge list and there's something that you see that's kind of towards the bottom and you want to try to push it up to the top because we won't be able to answer everything, then you can do that. But before we jump into that, give everyone some time to kind of get in and get situated and think about what they want to ask. I do want to bring up a generalized question that, comes up anytime anybody addresses Prince and his legacy as a whole. If you know what I've mentioned before in my history working in the music industry, there was a time where I was working with a lot of executives who had previously interacted with Prince around the time of the symbol, the contractual fight and switching over to the symbol. And, it was always interesting. I was always kind of a fly on the wall and part of these meetings where people would speak of him and reference it as being this wacky, crazy time. And he's this difficult, petulant brat. And we've all heard it. We all know that that's, the way that a lot of the media positioned it as well. But these kinds of presentations obviously show the contextual backgrounds, that none of this stuff, I don't believe, I cannot imagine, was just, off the cuff. I'm just going to be difficult and I'm just going to do this because I want to make a scene. There were very deep reasons. And I think that because Prince himself was such a sensitive person, was such a researcher on his own, was in love with connecting the dots in history and context, that it's pretty evident that this all was in play for a while. There was a lot that he looked into. I know that I think it was Zachary said in the chat before that he now does wonder how far in advance was all of this planned out, because there are elements that you can pinpoint and see from, previous years. But in these music industry talks, it was always kind of written off that, he was just an odd person and that he did this just to be difficult. But now we see, obviously, with even Laura just closed out with her symbol presentation, that there's a larger question at play as far as now when you tie it back to the other presentations with the police brutality, hypermasculinity in hip hop, racial constructs. You can actually take pieces of all of that and realize why he was making this statement. And I just wish that people did understand that more, to know that if you're going to say that you can take my name away from me and you can change my identity, you can take my culture away from me, you can take my creative voice away from me, then why can't I disconnect from that and say, then I'm going to be another entity and I'm I'm going to be another being. And what he was doing that was referenced in all of these presentations was taking on, you know, the role of something that people may write off as appropriation when it's not, because he probably did do the research and knew that there were people from the past that were connected to his people and his background and his culture that also were connected to the images that he was putting forth. There were people that wanted to write him off, that he had no business, you know, involving himself in hip hop because of his clothing, because of the way he carried himself. But again, he was creating this separate entity. So do you feel, unfortunately, though, that he was not praised as far as his musical prowess and acumen because of these constantly shifting looks? And as much as we love them and as creative as they were, do you feel like it has hurt his musical respect that he gets? So if anyone wants to jump in with that, just
I guess I could get the ball rolling. It brings to mind the question from Adam's amazing presentation yesterday, where somebody asked about the songwriting and him getting the credit due for his incredible songwriting. And he really dissected it for us in a way that I had never really seen in one of these symposia before. And I think I was thinking about that all day, and how there was just so much, and he did everything, and he touched on all these different parts and aspects of his life, but also the industry and the producing and the costuming. And I just feel like it was hard sometimes to pinpoint things. And that's one thing that I really love about these talks, is that we get to go do these deep dives. Like, I had never thought of the Orientalism aspect that Robin so beautifully deconstructed for us, and what was happening in LA, and all the police brutality issues that Casci brought up. And so I think that there just needs to be so much attention paid to all of these things. And I don't feel like at the time people seem to have the capacity for that. And so that's one reason I'm glad that we're doing these.
Robin or Casci, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah.
Oh,
On you go.
I was just going to say that I just also feel like Prince was ahead of his time. I mean, we all know this and we all say this as Prince fans, but I think like now, where gender fluidity and all these things are becoming part of the norm, back then, you know, people would make jokes and say certain things about his possible sexual preference based on the way he dressed. And so people kind of got lost in that whole mindset about him, instead of paying attention to all the things that he was actually trying to say and do. I think that now, even though he's not here, this is the perfect time to sort of look at all of these things and recognize that, yeah, he was ahead of his time. And like the research I just did for this paper, I had no idea the connection between the jazz musicians and Islam, but I have a feeling that he knew this, and he saw that that was their way of changing their identity so that they could be free. And he basically took that on and said, I'm going to do that too, but in my own way. So it's like, you know, we're looking back, but we're also looking ahead. So he was always ahead of his time. I think people just got lost in the noise because, oh, he's wearing booty out pants. But it's like, you know, there's so much more to him than that. So I'm glad that we can do this now to sort of discover all this.
I agree. And I don't know if everyone here is aware. I just wanted to add this before Casci weighs in, if she has anything that she'd like to add. But there was a story that Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top had come out with after April 2016, saying that he was admitting, unfortunately, as a lot of the other, famous white rock musicians all have come out to say, that he actually didn't even realize Prince's talent. He thought that he was, using stage props during Purple Rain, which is just ludicrous. And, it just explains why there's such a bias towards giving him the recognition that he deserves. And he admitted that and said that when he saw him at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, his mind was blown, because then he realized, oh, wait a second, this guy actually is let's be honest, better than most of us. But I wasn't aware of this. And then he got the chance to sit down with Prince shortly thereafter, and they discussed, musician to musician, different, amplification, tips, and, said, oh, Prince loved certain songs from ZZ Top and was asking Billy for tips. And then Billy was asking about, how can I play the When Doves Cry guitar solo? And, they had this alleged chat. And Billy did say that, one of the funny kind of questions that Prince posed to him at the end was, does your beard get in the way of playing to the best of your ability, like my costumes sometimes do? So he understood, I think, that there was some times where that could get in the way. And I know that Zaire had even added to the chat before that, the reference to lace becoming an innovation because the chainmail wouldn't have worked with the comfort on stage is, I think, connected to that statement in some way, that it sometimes could get in the way, and that image and that presence and the ability to kind of overlook someone's talents and write them off because of what they look like is really threaded through all of this material. Do you have anything that you want to add to that, Casci?
No, I think it's, I've never really thought of it that way before, because I've always been so, like, Prince and fashion to me is, do you know that way? Like, it's just, but it is really interesting to think of it that way, especially with that story that you've told. And I think when you're talking about, I think Prince knew the importance of costume because of his family and the people that raised him in North Minneapolis, and the kind of mentors that he had. These people that were telling them, like how to show up and show out on stage, and the kind of knack of clothing for performance. And I think it's interesting what you were saying about, like the clothes affecting the way that he plays and stuff, because Prince was so particular about that throughout his career. And I think that's why so many of his designers and costumers that worked with him throughout his career had that base knowledge in theatre design. So they were making costumes that could be whipped off and had like hidden buttons and hidden intricacies, just like a dancer, a burlesque dancer or a belly dancer. And that's why it's so interesting to have Robin's point of view as well, coming from, Robin dances. So she knows that it's all fine and good to look amazing and fabulous, but if it's not being that vehicle for what you need it to do, what's the point? You're just going to be like everybody else. And I think Prince has such a unique kind of place in popular culture. And when we think of people like music icons that are associated with fashion, is that he was able to completely rip the arse out of everybody on stage and literally do it dressed in corseted trousers. And it's just such a unique, and that's why it's such an important thing that we do speak about the fashion, because echoing as well, Robin talking about the gender element of it. A lot of what, nowadays we look at representations of people in the media, and we are a younger generation is more accustomed to. I'm 34, but people that are in their that are in their teens are nobody bats an eyelid now, especially younger generations. But when there's still some representations of Prince that you look at and you think, wow, nobody really does it, and I don't think we'll ever really do it like Prince. And obviously people like Little Richard and Esquita and James Brown and all these incredible musicians that made him who he was. The most important the thing about Prince that I think he's exceptionally good at is that he cherry picks from everywhere. And it's that, when you'd mentioned about being a researcher, he was so well read and so well versed in so many different subcultures, and he was just bristling with ideas, and he had the balls to actually put it together in such a unique and kind of powerful way. Sorry, I just blathered.
No, I totally agree. And I know, connected to that, D'Angela had mentioned before that, she wishes that more people knew about all of this deep dive work that he put into what he was putting out into the universe, because unfortunately, when these type of facts kind of fall by the wayside, that you do have newer artists kind of getting the credit for certain things. And not, she mentioned about Beyonce's video album, but nothing to take away from that. That project is phenomenal. But yes, when you see people saying, oh, this is incredible that she invented, doing these visual albums, and it's like, well, actually, knock, knock, Prince did this. I have witnessed that myself with, you may or may not be familiar, but Young Thug is one of the rappers who has, as you brought up, Casci, that now it's, people don't bat an eye that he came out with one of his albums, wearing a dress on the cover. And a lot of people automatically were saying, he's the one to break down these barriers and show that you can still be masculine and you could be a rapper and you could still, come out with a certain type of content, but still wear ruffles and lace. And now there are more artists that are taking off and doing that as well in that sector. But I've gotten into so many arguments with friends who love to spark that conversation about how Young Thug is the pioneer of all of this. And like, sit down and let me tell you the history of a man named Prince Rogers Nelson. But I do see the lineage there. So let me actually. Oh, okay.
For me, it's Harry Styles, the students I'm teaching just
yes.
now. I just get so many essays about HarryStyles as the first person to do, like gender neutral garments.
Fluidity, yeah.
And I just kind of serve them a little, like, blow their minds, show them the hot thing outfit, hot thing performance, and just walk away.
Right, exactly. Like press play and walk away. That's what we all have to do. Press play and walk away. Expose everyone to this. So let's actually look at some of the questions from the audience now. To kick it off, let's see. Carol Brooks has asked, Miss Robin, can it happen that your presentation become a tour option at Paisley Park with those of us fashion appreciators being able to see the clothes up close? What can we do to make that be? So I know that your answer is probably, let me know. So if there's someone here that can please reach out to the powers that be, I think we would all love that, because the references to the coins and the paillettes and showing close-up pictures of Maite's costumes were truly phenomenal. But what is your take on your presentation being part of a Paisley tour option?
Well, first, I guess I'm incredibly flattered that anybody would think that. Second, from your lips to God's ears. And yeah, I mean, I'm a nerd, and I would say that Prince was an influence on me, and also just being curious about a whole bunch of different types of things. So that's why I'm also a fashion designer, and that's why I'm also a belly dancer, and that's why I'm a big Prince fan. So I would love the opportunity to do a whole bunch of research and put something like that together. I mean, I don't know, tell them to call me. I would love that, but thanks, that's really flattering.
Okay.
I think as well, just to add as well, there's a greater problem with Paisley Park in the way that a lot of the clothes are displayed, and that the context is not provided, or it's a very base level context. And I don't want to speak out of but we've all of us have been in conversations before, and we know that there's so much that can get dug out from these garments and these stories. And these stories tell Prince's legacy just as much as a song does. And also as well, I think it's really important that we speak about the creatives that make these garments. And so yeah, I think that context, and like Robin's illuminated, the use of the coins and these links that people aren't aware of, it's so important that they are reflected. And I hope that there's more to come. I was really excited about the recent Paisley Park event with Debbie McGuan and the Minneapolis fashion show as well, and I think it's going in the right direction. But it's they could do better. I'm not saying that, but we just want more.
They need to put us all in charge, and it would be spectacular. I think I told that to
Casci
before.
Yeah.
You should just let us do it.
I mean, just to add to this, I have the Paisley Park book here right now, and this is what we have in here, and that's the context, this tiny little,
Right.
And it does, to be fair, this one actually does have the date, and it mentions Debbie McGuan, which is like, not every photo in here even has a caption at all. So
Yeah.
it needs to be context. This is Colette, by the way.
Hi, Colette. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many connective ideas, because then when you take that further and you bring it into how, Prince decided to introduce Maite to the mainstream through the Arsenio Hall performance, and how, Arsenio pretended to just pull her out of, the audience so that she can do her special quarters, move. All of that is connected, and all of that could be, shown in a separate exhibit, and reference back to those performances and explain why, Prince was so amazingly detailed in how he would roll out each of these projects and eras. As we just said, there was definitely a longer lead time to a lot of these developments. But let me go back to the questions for a second, because this one from Jeremy is interesting also about form and function, because it says, does anyone have any thoughts about the keytar versus the guitar use? Why he stopped using it mostly after this era? Was it more of a fashion thing than a music thing? Does anyone have any idea, if with their research, if there was more of a form or function reference or not?
I have no idea, but I just am envisioning Tommy Bopparella like floating across the stage, and that's, when Prince declares himself dead, and with I think they do Pussy Control in that one, maybe, or they do Billy Jack Bitch. Anyway, I don't have the reference in my non-encyclopedic head right now, but like that's the only time I even think about the guitar. So.
Was it the AMAs? Was it AMAs? American Music Awards?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
the kind of dance mega mix thing. Yeah.
Right.
That yeah. I'm not sure either. Guitars, I don't have that knowledge, but I think it would be amazing if somebody did a deep dive on, like the kind of design and function of the. I know somebody did, I think many moons ago in Manchester, but I think it's definitely a really interesting, because there will be just as much thought in that and the visuals of that as it is to his boots.
Yeah.
I just have a slightly, it's a part of the same, well, it's not really, but I was just thinking, because this came up yesterday, like why he chose to use the acoustic guitar for 7. And I just want to say, I think that was a 12-string guitar. And I think that he used that because it sounds very similar to the oud, which is the Middle Eastern lute. And I think he was trying to capture that sound. Now, that didn't have anything to do with the question, except for it was about guitars, but I just wanted to nerd out for a second. So,
oh no, I'm glad you actually brought that up, Robin, because I mean, focusing on again Prince's interest in doing his own research, I really now it's going to be on my mind, morning, noon, and night. Did he know about Korla? Because I want to believe, yes, that he did. I agree with you. People who spent a lot of time with him on, a personal level, prior to YouTube even, would say how he would seek things out, whether it was through literature or VHS tapes. But then with the dawn of YouTube, I mean, everyone admits it, but you could only imagine, because everyone did the same thing, that you just could fall into wormholes and find so much information and so much history. So now it's just always going to be needling at the back of my brain, had he been exposed to a lot of the information that you brought forth, because that was truly an outstanding reference, because it shows how, a lot of the potential comments that could come out if and when this album does see the light of day in a larger, context with, a super deluxe, and hits the mainstream, in the same way that each of these projects has had a rollout where it carries over into non-Prince community members discussing each of the albums now in real time and through a 2022 lens. And if those comments do come up about potential appropriation in this being somewhat of a very role-playing, costumey era, I would love if you are just the person that could submit your presentation as a reply to everyone that wants to try to go there with it, to say, you know, there's so many people. I just said this briefly to D'Angela and Arthur backstage, but there's so much history that's obviously lost in the fact that many people are known as the first to do something when they're not at all. It's just that, you know, for the sake of necessity and freedom and safety, there are people who obviously hid their true background. Or, you know, even in the times of Prince, where he did have more freedom to kind of, you know, jump between genres, you know, there still were barriers in place, you know, in the 80s and 90s. And so sometimes it's just out of necessity that you want to have access to another side of something. So I do commend you for, you know, diving into all that. And as we said, I mean, hopefully there'll be a reason that you can distribute it on a larger level. Let me see now. Let's see. Okay. Liam says, any thoughts on how there are segments of fashion as much as music yet to come from the vault, the style of Welcome to America as an example? Someone want to jump in on that? There are segments of fashion and looks and eras that potentially haven't been dissected as much as the stuff that was out there already.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of space for the 1990s and the noughties to be kind of dissected, because there's a lot of work that's kind of came out about the 80s and the kind of like early 1990s, which is fantastic, and we're all just beginning to start unpicking stuff. But I think there's a lot that in particular, like the final outfits, I think they're something to kind of really dig deep into. I do talk a little bit about a couple of them, but I think it's something that really, and I think as well we need to start doing it, and we are doing it. I'm speaking to quite a few designers that worked with them in the 2000s, because we need to kind of get those stories down now, because, you know, like some of the designers in the 80s and the 90s are no longer with us, so we need to kind of, it's that kind of oral history we need to so yeah. And I think hopefully I think the estate are doing a good job of using social media to get engagement with the garments and the collections. And I've been really excited by some of there was only one that I saw, but it was on Facebook, and it was one of the guys going into the old wardrobe department, which is now where they store the costume archive. So I got particularly excited by that, but I've never seen anything. And I was really disappointed as well that a lot of the stuff they don't make it digital. So, you know, like hopefully it can get opened up to all of us. But yeah, thank God that Prince kept everything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was a great record keeper. This question has been upvoted several times, so let's see if anyone can weigh in here. From Sijin, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I'm sorry about that. Seeing the Prince exhibit in London and Amsterdam, it was fun to see so many hand-painted fabrics. Does anybody know where other fabrics came from? Did he have them made, or did they come from special stores?
I was going to answer that. We'll probably have the same answer, but I know I was listening to Stacia Lang on the Prince podcast, and she was saying that she ordered a lot of stuff for him. Like, she basically ordered special laces. I think in some cases they kind of made things, or like had things dyed to kind of change the look of them. Like, you know, like the jacket that Troy Bayo is wearing, as opposed to Prince's chainmail top. It was basically the same lace. It was just dyed to be different. I don't know. Actually, I would love to know where they get all those fabrics from. because
Troy Byer, Objects of Desire.
I know, right?
I like
Nice.
that was cute.
But I don't know if Casci has more info on that.
No, I was kind of just going to echo the same. I think a lot of it was done in Minneapolis by like hand dyers and stuff. And it's not the era that we're talking about. Well, one of my favorite stories about sourcing fabric for Prince is Marie France, a costume designer. She told me that when they were doing Under the Cherry Moon, she got a lot of the vintage fabric from the Paramount Studios in Los Angeles, which is such a lovely tangent to, like Prince creating his, like French Riviera version of 1930s/1980s Hollywood. And just the idea that he's wearing these garments, it was some damask and cashmere, I think, off the top of my head. So they could have been, like worn in outfits worn by, like I just think it's such a lovely link. But I think a lot of it was bespoke, where it could be.
I know the time flies, so we've gone over by a minute. Now that you were just speaking, Casci, and your presentation was about the chain hat, I want to try to just get maybe one more question in, and then we can kind of close out. But with the chain hat, was there any explanation how the chains never interfered with his vocals? I was always so puzzled about that.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. They were made of lightweight aluminium, so I feel like somebody needs to do like an experiment. And somebody that's got one of the hats,
the chain hats, yeah,
whip their head,
use a microphone and record with and without it, and
I think there must be there must be some form of it will be specially weighted so that it doesn't interact. But again, it's just an amazing example of that level to detail.
Right. So I would love to ask you, all of these questions and keep this going. I know that we have to stay on schedule so that people can take a break before the roundtables for today. I would like to maybe wrap it up with just another generalized question. I'm very curious about this with people who are rooted in fashion and design. There are a lot of people, especially in this day and age, who have discussions about whether or not they can disconnect certain personality traits or something they don't like about someone from their art, whether or not they connect to a certain album or a single, whether or not it resonates with them, just depending on what they don't like about this person. I've always wondered if the eras and the looks and the fashion influence you. If you're in such a fashion-based design brain and design space, do you feel that there's albums and music that you like more or less simply based on the look and the fashion associated with it? So let's get a comment from everyone so that we can end on that note. So Karen, do you want to?
Yeah, I can go first. So that, like, the diamonds and pearls and love symbol era for me is, I just think he looks the best, especially in like Cream and in Sexy Motherfucker, because those were filmed around the same time. Like, you can see his hair kind of changes and his style does change throughout the Love Symbol album, because Sexy Motherfucker was done like while they were on tour still with Diamonds and Pearls. And so I don't know, for me, and I think I talked about it in the talk. It's just that, like, that silhouette, the hair, the makeup, the like little bit of facial hair, and I just associate, like, this was my entry to Prince, and I have to admit, like, Sexy Motherfucker was one of the first songs I ever heard consciously by Prince. So I came into him sort of late in like 96, 97. And so, and this song wasn't even being played anymore by then, right, at all. And so it was just a mixtape my buddy made me when I was like, I don't like Prince. And he was like, shut your mouth and here's a mixtape. And he like made a mixtape for me, and I like I never looked back. And I never actually saw the video until kind of recently, like a few years back. But I do remember that image of him from those famous, like the Herb Ritts photo shoot in Vogue circulating, because it was on the cover of the hits 1 and 2 and the B-sides. And for me, that was Prince. Yeah, that was Prince. And so that's just, and then I later discovered all his 80s stuff, and it was like Christmas. I was like, oh my gosh, dirty mind, what? And so then I kind of had a reversal of it. So that's why I have a soft spot in my heart for like this era. I love gold, but I actually don't really like how he looks as much as I do like in the gold era as much.
Robin's giving you a thumbs up. I think a lot of people actually feel that way. I think
I think
a lot of people love Diamonds and Pearls and the love symbol so much. I mean, there's comments coming up from the audience that, Zach, I think, just said that he thinks now that like 80% of his appreciation of this era is because of the looks and the fashion and style.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember, this is just a side note, when we were a year ago talking to D'Angela about like who's going to do what for the style panel for the 1+1=3. And she was like, I think we can do, one of you does Diamonds and Pearls and one of you does, the Time and Pandemonium, and one of you does like Rainbow Children era. And then we kind of discussed and we were like, no, we all need to do Diamonds and Pearls because
it's such a rich era, right?
Yeah, and I think we still didn't pay it homage enough. And this too, like I'm blown away by everybody's deep dives into all of the stuff, like how he looks in this era. And I still feel like it's scratching the surface. Like there's so many other looks to dive further into. So
thank you. So Robin, I'll have you weigh in, and I'm curious if there's also an alternate side to it, that there's a look that you don't connect to and thus you don't really connect to that music.
I would say, yeah, definitely gold. I actually have sort of gotten into the Gold Experience album more like recently, like more in the last couple of years, because at that yeah, and that particular time, I just didn't like the look, because he, like Karen said, he came from Diamonds and Pearls and like the love symbol, and like there was just so much just beauty, like
joy and just ebullience. Yes.
And then gold, he was with the slave, and I understand his decision to do that. However, it didn't feel fun. So that's definitely a period where I kind of was like,
yeah, a lot of people weigh in on the makeup, that the foundation.
Yes, the foundation. He was very pale, and he looked thin. I just didn't like that time. What was the other part of the question?
And then what era do you connect to the most because you're so in love with the fashion and the looks?
Well, obviously the Love Symbol album, because that was like my first time seeing Prince. Like I had been a Prince fan since the 80s, but that was my first time really being an adult, like a young adult, going out to see Prince. And like he was in New York, and me and my friends got to see him in person, and like just seeing him so that whole period around 93 with the Love Symbol album is definitely my favorite. I would say my other favorite would be like the early 80s, like 82, when I kind of was coming into Prince awareness, but I was like really into Vanity 6. I was only 11, so I should not have been, but I was really, I wanted to be Vanity so badly. Yeah. I was just like, that's my woman. I want to be her. That's who I aspire to be. So those two periods definitely are the standouts for like, that period of early 80s Prince awareness, and then the 90s being an adult, getting to like go out and just like all the visuals that surrounded it.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And Cassie, what is your most and least favorite?
It's so hard to choose. One of my least favorites used to be Rave, and then I remember as a teenager, I just felt like it just wasn't Prince. But I think now, like I can look back at Prince's like kind of like Y2K, like the hair glitter, like and the bodysuits, it's so Millennium Bug. So I think now I've got like a really kind of like I see a lot of joy in those clothing that I didn't when I was younger. Because I remember when I got the Rave DVD, I was like, what is Prince kicking about with like Sheryl Crow, and like what is going on here? But now I appreciate it. Now I definitely do appreciate it. And it's so hard to choose favorites. But I love that period of like 1979, 1978, when he's like kind of like honing things. And you know, like I have a lot of fondness for Diamonds and Pearls because of the Get Off performance on MTV, because that was one of the first times I saw Prince.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to choose. The Hot Thing costume always, because I think that's such a beautiful marriage of like song and design, because it's just perfect.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's very hard to choose. I love him musicology as well. I think he looks fantastic. And 3121 as well, like with
Yeah.
I think when he kind of started to play a bit more with the kind of line and the drapery of his suits at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so
I'll just wrap it up. Like I said, I could speak on this for hours, and I'm sad that it's already 10 minutes over. We're all gonna get in trouble with D'Angela. Probably me the most, because I'm probably supposed to be cutting everybody off, but I just don't want to. I want to talk about this forever. But I will just leave everybody with the thought that there really is, I don't believe any other artist who has succeeded in doing, like you said, something that's so explicitly structured, like suits, but then they've also done, you know, spandex, and they've also done, you know, very ornate lace, you know, the cutouts on the pants, you know, someone that's done all of that so well. You know, there's obviously been other, you know, huge artists that have experimented with, you know, very involved clothing, but to be able to have so many fans of such a dichotomy in the way that you present yourself, and both are amazing, you know, from the 70s all the way up until 2010s, I just think is so commendable. But I really thank you all for what you have brought forth today. Hopefully these conversations can continue for people with you guys on social media, or later on in the lounge, or in the booths. And perhaps in a future symposia, we'll continue the conversation with another album. Thank you all very much.